And I just don't get it. I really don't, other than the fact that it's Donald J. Trump. If this was a Democrat that was doing this, everyone would be saying, well, he's on his way to the Nobel Peace Prize. This is absurd. We are trying to end a war. You cannot end a war unless both sides come to the table, starting with the Russians. And that is the point the president has made. And we have to do whatever we can to try to bring them to the table to see if it's even possible. I'm not promising you it's possible. I'm not telling you it's 90% likely. I'm saying it's 0% likely if we don't get them to a negotiating table. And the sooner everyone grows up around here and figures out that this is a bad war that's heading in a bad direction with death and destruction and all kinds of dangers surrounding it that could spiral into a broader conflict, the sooner people grow up and realize that, I think the more progress we're going to be able to make.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio appeared on Face the Nation, George Stephanopoulos. And if you aren't familiar with who George Stephanopoulos is, George Stephanopoulos at one time was the campaign manager for then Governor Bill Clinton, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton. He worked alongside the lunatic James Carville, who's the, reputable, well, I won't say reputable, who's the longtime campaign manager who does these crazy, wild, out of this world takes on what's going on in politics. Well, another way you might know Mr. George Stephanopoulos is because President Trump recently won a $15 million defamation lawsuit against George Stephanopoulos for defaming the president, calling him a rapist on television while interviewing Congresswoman Nancy Mace on her show. Things got really hairy, and I won't get into that, but Marco Rubio, who's the Secretary of State, decided to appear on the show. And one thing George Stephanopoulos is always good for is being an extreme left-wing propagandist and staying loyal to that party, pushing the craziest things that we've ever heard, things that have been destructive to the American people, like Russia hoax. George Stephanopoulos was big on pushing that Joe Biden was sane and was cogent, was pushing the fact that there was no border crisis and the Texas governors and were just making this up. Also, that crime was down. And the biggest hindrance that they did to us is by lying to us, telling us how great the economy is, as if people couldn't watch and manage their purses, their wallets, their bank accounts, and see things were going downhill fast and prices of things were jumping as high as 60%. And so now, do you remember earlier when during Trump's first term, after he left office, many economists regard Trump's first term as one of the greatest periods in American history prior to the pandemic. Right. But you know what leftists and liberals and progressive love to say? Oh, that's Obama's economy. Fast forward it to now. They talked about how great Biden's economy was now 5 weeks into President Trump's administration. And all you hear from the Democrats is the economy is terrible. It's horrible. So when the economy was great during Trump's term, it was because of Obama. But when the economy is terrible starting Trump's term, it's because of Trump, not Biden. You see, that's why the left is losing. That's why they have a 21% approval rating as far as the Democrats in the Congress and the Senate. 21%, the lowest it's been in the history of the party. It's because of pushing the fabricated lies. Now, in this interview, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is going to give George Stephanopoulos a masterclass in how you handle journalists that are trying to push an agenda, trying to misdirect and mislead the American people. And he didn't learn his lesson from his defamation suit because he's still just a small word or two away from towing that line and getting ABC News tore up again. So without further ado, let's witness this masterclass from Secretary of State Rubio as he schools George Stephanopoulos and teaches other Republicans how to handle these left-wing lunatics, these libtards, when they're trying to mislead, misrepresent, and sway the American public to fight against what's best for us. Check this out.
Bringing the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us this morning. Has there been any contact with President Zelensky since Friday?
Well, I haven't had any contact with him since Friday. We have plenty of contacts with him, though. Plenty. I mean, he met in the last 10 days. He's met with the Secretary of Commerce. He spoke to the president on the phone, met with the Secretary of Commerce, met with me, met with the Vice President, met with our special envoy, and then was invited and came over on, invited, he wanted to come over on Friday to sign this commercial deal. That didn't happen. So there's been plenty of contact with them. I've talked to the foreign minister several times, not since then. And we'll see moving forward. I think the last line in the president's Truth Social post is the one to focus in on. And that is, we'll be ready to re-engage when they're ready to make peace, which is clearly what the president's goal is here. He's trying to get Russia to the table to bring about, to see if there's a way to bring about an end to this conflict. That's his goal. That's his only goal. That's his centralized focus. And, hopefully we'll get to a point where that's possible.
If you're enjoying this video and you like the content, do me a solid. Hit that like button. I'll never ask you for a cash app. I'll never ask you for a super chat. But you hitting that like button, that is currency. Help spread the video around. And if you aren't subscribed to the channel, subscribe on the Real Politics Podcast. That's what we do. We talk real politics. So hit that subscribe button. And when you do, see the notification bell. Make sure you select all. That way, you'll be notified when I upload new videos. You know something, and I'm going to pause real quick. Most people don't realize that Zelensky, 2 times in a row, the reason why the meeting was so contentious with President Trump is because weeks ago, Zelensky had agreed to sign the minerals deal worth $500 billion to the U.S. The reason why this is so critical is because prior to President Trump, the Biden administration gave a blank check, open checkbook, and flooded Ukraine with weapons and money totaling $350 billion. The reason why that's an insult is because we have invested at least three times as much as the entire European Union collectively. And the European Union is made up of a bunch of different countries. And up to date, all they have to do as far as members of NATO is commit 2% of their national GDP, their gross domestic product, or gross domestic profit, whatever it is you want to call it. So the fact that they're not doing that, United States has been overcompensating, and Ukraine has agreed to pay back the nations in the European Union. Great Britain just signed a $2 billion loan to Ukraine this past Friday. Germany loaned the money. Australia loaned the money. And yet these leaders of those countries swore to President Trump face to face that, no, they were just giving it to him. It wasn't a loan. And that has already been exposed as a lie. So President Trump said, well, hold on. We've got an ocean in between us. It's far more critical for y'all over there in the European Union. Y'all have spent much less than we have. We've given up weapons and cash. You're not. So why is he paying y'all back but not us? Why is America getting screwed, but y'all who have more to lose but have had less that you gave getting paid back? President Trump said, no, we're not doing that. So the minerals deal worth $500 billion to the U.S. And here's why that's a good move strategically. As a business partner now with American stake in that country, Russia and any other country is a lot less willing or likely to invade because they know that's instant conflict with the U.S. The same thing right now with Putin offering a minerals deal to the U.S. People would say, oh, Trump's pandering if he takes it. No, Putin is smart. And he says, if the United States has an investment or a stake in Russia, that will keep other countries from attacking Russia. So strategically, the United States can have a stake in these 2 warring countries. And as being the mediator with a stake in both, we have a vested interest to keep peace, to help administer peace. And both sides have better relations with America than they obviously do with themselves. So I just wanted to bring it up to speed as we get into why they were so pissed. So the Secretary of the Treasury went over to Kyiv a few weeks ago to meet with President Zelensky to sign the minerals deal. When he gets there, he tries to back out. They have an argument, according to sources and Secretary of the Treasury himself, where they were screaming and yelling. They said the decibels got really high, much louder than what happened with President Trump and Zelensky. Okay, except for President Trump and Zelensky's exchange was in front of the cameras. And that was because Zelensky felt that if he litigated it in front of the media, the American public would do what they've done the whole time under Biden, which is have his back and go crazy and force President Trump to bend the knee. What he didn't count on is the fact that patriotism is on the rise, and the American public is sick of giving away our hard-earned taxpayer dollars to a country that wants to fight an endless war that can never win it. Ukraine will never defeat Russia, never in a million years, never. So that's why Trump, J.D. Vance was so upset, why it was disrespectful, because they even agreed before that meeting that they would not talk about it in the press. Zelensky saw the cameras and he pounced, and he saw the backlash he's received has been overwhelming, except for we have Democrat congressional members asking for our president to apologize to the person that we helped. President Zelensky already said he doesn't even know where half the money is out of his own mouth. So you don't know where it is. It probably went to the pockets of Ukrainian oligarchs and somehow it's funneled back to the Democrats who are waving Ukrainian flags on the congressional floor, trying to keep this endless war going where men and boys are dying every day. And for what? And they wanted to go where United States may end up getting into it. So we're not going to have that. But let me get back and let the secretary do his thing. I apologize.
The British Prime Minister said this morning that the United Kingdom and France are working on a peace plan with Ukraine to present to the U.S. Do you know where things stand with that plan?
No, I mean, I've talked to both of the foreign ministers of France and the UK yesterday, and I explained to them sort of the events leading up to what you saw on Friday. Look, I think what's really important here is to understand the dynamic. The president is basically saying there's this horrible war. It's been going on for 3 years. It is a bloody stalemate, a meat grinder type war, and he wants it to end. How does it end? It's very simple. The only way it ends is if Vladimir Putin comes to a negotiating table. And right now, President Trump is the only person on earth who has any chance whatsoever of bringing him to a table to see what it is he would be willing to end the war on. Now, maybe their claims or what they want, their demands will be unreasonable. We don't know, but we have to bring him to the table. You're not going to bring him to the table if you're calling him names, if you're being antagonistic. That's just the president's instincts from years and years and years of putting together deals as someone who's in business. And that's the only goal here.
Let me just stop you there for 1 second.
Why is it a war with no end in sight?
Why is it okay to call President Zelensky Why is it okay to call President Zelensky a dictator, but not, as you say, call Vladimir Putin names?
Listen, we've spent 3 years calling Vladimir Putin names. That's not the point. The point that we're at now is we're trying to get the man to a table, the Russians. And I've said from the very beginning, maybe they don't want a deal either. We don't know, but we haven't talked to them in 3 years, but maybe they do. The point is, do we want to make, I would ask everybody this, if there are no negotiations, what is the alternative? Another 4 years of war, another 3 years of war in which the United States and Europe continues to pour billions of dollars into a war in Ukraine? Is that the alternative? I've asked every foreign minister I meet with, tell me your idea of how this turns out. Most don't have a plan. A few have said, well, let's give them another year of fighting. A year from now, a year later, after another year of death, another year of destruction, then maybe Putin will be ready to negotiate at that point. That doesn't sound like a good plan to me, and it certainly is not a plan the president's on board with.
It's not.
The Democrats had 3 years to resolve it. They had no solution. Now President Trump actually has a solution, bringing it to the table, doing peace. And now they've got all the ways to get it done. Kind of like waste, fraud, and abuse. They had 4 years to get it right, never could. But now that it's being done, they got a way. They want to tell somebody how to do it. They're crazy.
Not just about getting people to the table. It's about keeping agreements that are made. And that was one of the points that President Zelensky was making in the Oval Office on Friday, is that Vladimir Putin has not kept the agreements that were made in the past. Wasn't he right about that?
But what is moving forward is the question, not the past. No one here is claiming Vladimir Putin is going to get the Nobel Peace Prize this year, or that he should be the man of the year of the Humanitarian Association. What we're arguing here is he has a very large country. They're in full war footing. They're cranking out weapons now at a war footing pace. And we need to figure out, is there a way to get them to stop the war? And the only way you're going to do that is to get Russians engaged in negotiations, something the Europeans haven't been able to do, the Biden administration wasn't able to do or didn't even try. That's the goal here. It's that simple. Can we try to sit with them and figure out whether there's anything, what are the Russians' demands? Under what conditions would the Russians be willing to stop this war? And as I said, we don't know what those are because we haven't talked to them in 3 years. That's the singular goal here, is to try to bring about an end to this conflict, and it begins by getting them to the table. Ultimately, like any truce, like any peace agreement anywhere in the world, those things will have to be enforced, they'll have to be enduring, there'll have to be safeguards put in place. Everybody understands that, but it begins with the first step, and that is engaging them to see if it's even possible. Because if it's not possible, then what we're looking at is a protracted stalemate with thousands of people dying, billions of dollars pouring in, and more death and destruction. And that's not something the president wants to be a part of. He's made it very clear.
Aren't those talks feasible only if the United States is willing to also provide security guarantees to Ukraine? That was the point that President Zelensky was also making in the Oval Office.
Well, the security guarantees, which I actually like to call deterrence of is all contingent upon there being a peace. Everybody's saying security guarantees to secure the peace. You first have to have a peace. We don't even know if the peace is possible. And this was understood by the Ukrainians. It was explained to them repeatedly. And that is, here's our strategy. We're trying to get Putin to a negotiating table. Let's not everyone knows the history here, the back and forth. We understand that. We all understand that. But the question now is, can we get them to a table to negotiate? That's our goal. Don't do anything to disrupt that. And that's what Zelensky did, unfortunately, is he found every opportunity to try to Ukraine-splain on every issue. Then he confronts the vice president. When the vice president says, the goal here is diplomacy, he immediately jumps in and challenges the vice president. Well, what kind of diplomacy? So we all understand, okay, that Putin is not going to be an easy negotiator in this regard. We all get that. But we have to start the process to see if something is even possible. And I honestly am puzzled. I just don't understand. The Biden administration berated Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis, put all kinds of conditions and pressure on them to try to get a ceasefire. In this particular case, we've been nice by comparison. And all we're trying to do here is figure out whether a peace is possible. All these other things that people keep bringing up, that'll have to be a part of a negotiation. Right now, there is no negotiation. Shouldn't we at least try to see if there is a way to end this war in a way that's acceptable to both sides and is enduring and sustainable? How is that a bad thing? I really am puzzled why anyone thinks that trying to be a peacemaker is a bad thing. It's only a bad thing when it's Donald Trump trying to do it. When it's President Trump, it's absurd to me.
Let them know. And because the Democrat Party, with everything that's happened with USAID, the things that we've been found, I got some videos dropping on that, how they've been able to link George Soros to it. But these Democrats, they want to insult Putin, but then want him to stop invading Ukraine. They put him in Russia, but they want him to bring peace. These libtards don't really want peace. They all have investments in stake in the military industrial complex. Do you know that they've been exposing how so many congressmen on the right and the left that love this Ukraine war, how they're invested in these multi-billion-dollar military defense weapon making companies, and during wartime stocks go way up and they're making millions of dollars. So screw the American people. They're all about their budgets. Even Warhawk Lindsey Graham came out against the way Zelensky was. So watching the left-wing propagandists, George Stephanopoulos and the rest of the left-wing media push this, when for 3 years they had zero answers. Now they want to try to step in and act like they want to dictate how it should go and all of this. You had 3 years. The war's been going on since February 2022. You couldn't get it done. Trump is the closest and the only one who can.
Well, even some of your Republican allies are puzzled by the steps that President Trump has taken to placate Vladimir Putin. I want to bring up a post that Lisa Murkowski.
Well, which ones? What steps has the president taken to placate?
Let me show you. Let me show you what.
Are we arming the Russians? Are we providing economic assistance to the Russians? Have we given the Russians $180 million?
Please let me ask you a question. This is Lisa Murkowski, and here's what she says. This week started with administration officials refusing to acknowledge that Russia started the war in Ukraine. It ends with a tense and shocking conversation in the Oval Office and whispers from the White House that they may try to end all U.S. support for Ukraine. I know foreign policy is not for the faint of heart, but right now I am sick to my stomach as the administration appears to be walking away from our allies and embracing Putin, a threat to democracy and U.S. values around the world. Those are not my words. That's Senator Lisa Murkowski. What's your response?
Well, yeah, we're a free country. People have a right to these opinions. I would just say to you, what have we done to placate the Russians? The only thing we've done is say, are you guys willing to talk about peace? I say the same point. We're not giving that. We haven't given.
You voted with North Korea and Russia and you voted with North Korea and Russia and Belarus in the United Nations and against our Western allies.
No, let me tell you. All right. So you know what do you know what the United Nations resolution was? I'll tell you if you want to hear what it was. It basically said this has been a horrible war. It's time for it to end. The job of the UN is to bring about peace in the world. I thought that's what the UN was created to do, to stop wars and to prevent them. And that's what the resolution did. Was it antagonistic towards the Russians? No. Back to the point. But it also didn't praise the Russians. All it said is this is a bad war. It needs to end. And by the way, at the Security Council, which has not been widely reported, the first resolution on Ukraine that has passed the Security Council in 3 years passed this week because of the leadership of President Trump. And it's a resolution that says bad war needs to end. Let's bring the two sides together. That's what the resolution is. Again, what is the United Nations for? Isn't it not a forum to promote peace in the world? And shouldn't we all be happy that we have a president who's trying to stop wars and prevent them instead of start them? And I just don't get it. I really don't, other than the fact that it's Donald J. Trump. If this was a Democrat that was doing this, everyone would be saying, well, he's on his way to the Nobel Peace Prize. This is absurd. We are trying to end a war. You cannot end a war unless both sides come to the table, starting with the Russians. And that is the point the president has made. And we have to do whatever we can to try to bring them to the table to see if it's even possible. I'm not promising you it's possible. I'm not telling you it's 90% likely. I'm saying it's 0% likely if we don't get them to a negotiating table. And the sooner everyone grows up around here and figures out that this is a bad war that's heading in a bad direction with death and destruction and all kinds of danger surrounding it that could spiral into a broader conflict, the sooner people grow up and realize that, I think the more progress we're going to be able to make. But the president's crystal clear. He campaigned on it. And he's going to govern on it. And that is, he is going to be a president that tries to achieve peace. And he has been very clear. This is a war that would have never happened had Donald Trump been in the White House. And it needs to end. And we're going to do everything we can to end it in an enduring and sustainable and fair way.
You notice how George Stephanopoulos tried to throw a gotcha in there by saying, well, you voted against our Western allies. You voted with Russia and da-da-da. The United Nations resolution that they voted on was for peace. But he wasn't going to inform the audience that. He just made it like, oh, you were lying. So that shows you what the Western allies with their slush fund, led by some of what they wanted from America, which was to side with the West to say this is going to be an endless war. Let's just keep it going on. Putin bad, even though they know World War III would be the worst thing that happened. And see, Biden was trying to allegedly push us into World War III, because if we would have done that, that would have changed all types of executive powers. Trump would have never gotten in the White House at that point in time. But the fact that NATO rejected Ukraine, you see, under the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, their agreement is if one gets attacked, everybody fights. And that means if they would have let Ukraine in NATO, they would have instantly been thrusted into World War III, because it's already going on. Putin didn't want him in NATO. The EU didn't want him in NATO. America definitely does not want him in NATO. But Joe Biden wanted him in NATO. He literally tried. Why would he try to bring America into World War III? Well, he was the puppet. Why would his handlers or the people running the White House want to do that? It got to make you wonder what type of loyalty they really have to the country. So I wanted to just jump in and show you how Secretary of State Marco Rubio took George Stephanopoulos to task. He addressed it. And like he said, the sooner everybody puts their big boy pants on, their big girl pants on, and realize this is war. There is nothing sweet about war. And how can we ever bring peace if we keep insulting one of the people we want to bring to the peace table? So please, American citizens, stop listening to the left-wing media. President Trump literally will be up for a Nobel Peace Prize, especially if he gets this done. But the fact that he's an outsider, the fact that he's not down with the slush fund, he's not pushing the transgender agenda, he's not down with divisiveness through DEI policies and whatnot. The left-wing media, which is the media itself, which is nothing more than an extension, an armed extension, which they say is 60 to 70% of the media is left-wing. Their whole objective is to push the American people to create the uproar to allow them to continue screwing us all. And the more people wake up and say, whoa, I'm being used as a tool by these people. They don't want what's good for me. They want what's good for them and for their party, not America. They wouldn't be fighting, cutting waste, fraud, and abuse if they cared about America. They wouldn't be wanting to extend a war that has nothing to do with us, which currently, without that minerals deal, we have zero benefit from. So why do they want us in it? They're not our NATO partner, Ukraine. So since when did we get burdened with that? It's just crazy. But thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, like the video, share the video, subscribe to the Real Politics Podcast. And I sincerely thank you for watching. Again, I'm Brian Maxwell. If you've been with me to this point, you are awesome. And I look forward to seeing you at the top. Over and out.